We'll begin with recorded remarks by the managing director, followed by the remarks by the first deputy managing director, and transition directly into the first session. So please take a seat, get comfortable, and let's get started.
Good morning. Welcome to the 24th Jacques Polak Annual Research Conference. Let me start with a huge thank you to the Research Department and Pierre-Olivier for organizing this conference. Our dual mandate here is to explore global interdependence and to honor Ken Rogoff. We will start with Ken. Gita will speak about his contributions in the field of economics. I will talk about the mark he left at the fund. He did what a great chess master would do, always thinking several moves ahead. He served here at the turn of the century, and the profession and the world are still catching up with what he has done during his time. First, under Ken's leadership, the IMF acted early to expand the use of modern macro models, such as the global economy model. By helping bridge the gap between theory and forward-looking real-world policy analysis, these models help us better understand our more interdependent world. Fast forward to today, and such models are standard in bilateral and multilateral surveillance here and in institutions worldwide. Ken's efforts were transformative. Second, Ken left his mark on the fund's work on sovereign debt. This includes how we look at debt sustainability, absolutely critical to building fund-supported programs. He was also an early advocate for debt transparency, the reporting of comprehensive information on sovereign debt. 2 decades later, the need for transparency has moved to central stage as the creditor landscape has broadened and debt instruments have become more complex. Third, Ken advanced the fund's work on exchange rates and external sector analysis, a key part of multilateral surveillance. Under Ken's leadership, a more solid theoretical foundation was built for this work, and it was expanded to key emerging markets, a big step toward getting a full picture of global economic interdependence. You can draw a straight line from his efforts to the fund's flagship external sector report. His legacy is visible every day in the quality of our research and the fund's focus on how our policy recommendations affect ordinary people. Perhaps most important, his legacy is the people who have learned so much from him, from the economists who served under him here, to our first deputy managing director, Gita, who sought him out as a thesis advisor at Princeton. And I appreciate Ken's wise counsel as a member of my external advisory group. Through the incredibly wide reach of his writings, we are all his students. Reading Ken leaves us all better equipped to analyze both country-level economic challenges and the mechanisms of global interdependence. And this is our second mandate today. Think of the ways supply chains were upended during the pandemic and the impact of fragmentation since then. Our world is also more shock-prone. We had COVID, then Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and climate disasters continuing to grow more severe. These shocks have contributed to a cost of living crisis that hits hardest the poor, and the Israel-Gaza conflict adds more uncertainty and risks. Where are we today? We project global growth to slow down in 2023 and remain at around 3% over the next 5 years, the weakest medium-term forecast in decades. Core inflation is proving stubborn, as you know. Debt levels are near record highs, and higher for longer interest rates are making debt harder to service while exposing vulnerabilities in real estate and other sectors. Fragmentation is weighing on trade and capital flows. The volatility of these flows and of exchange rates is especially concerning for low and middle-income countries that need external financing. This leaves policymakers with a challenging set of questions. As they seek to create opportunities for their people and to maintain social cohesion, they must ask, first, how do we reduce inflation to the desired levels while maintaining growth and financial stability? This is a question for both advanced and emerging market economies. Discussions at our annual meetings in Marrakesh reinforced the broad agreement that monetary policy should remain laser-focused on bringing down inflation. This is the right course, but it does present a risk of spillovers from advanced to emerging economies and challenges to financial stability. These have been well managed so far, but continued vigilance and policy agility are critical. Second, how to support growth at a time of reduced fiscal space and rising funding costs from higher for longer interest rates. Well-designed and sequenced transformational reforms are key. This includes creating fiscal space to invest in people, in education, and in health. Third, what is the role of the international community? Domestic actions are simply not enough. We need cooperation on trade, on debt, and on ensuring that the poorest members of our global community have access to much-needed concessional financing. And we especially need to work together on the challenge where we are most interdependent, this of climate change. We have the pieces of our chessboard to tackle these problems: innovation and creativity, capital and technology, a motivation to solve them for the future of our children. And we have the collective will to act. In the words of the British philosopher and a chess enthusiast, Bertrand Russell, the only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation. May this conference help build more of it. We need it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Really a great pleasure to see so many familiar faces who are here to celebrate Ken. And thanks to Kristalina for describing her impact on the fund. For me, it's a real honor to do this. I've had the privilege of being Ken's student and his colleague at Harvard. And I really am very thankful to him for his support over the many, what is now decades, not years, decades of working together. Ken's impact in academia and policymaking is truly profound. It covers numerous areas, and I really can't do justice to it in 5 minutes. But I'm going to just highlight a few of his biggest hits. I think I can start off by recognizing that in terms of influence, Ken is one of the most influential living economists that we have around us. So in terms of Ken's biggest hits, let me start off with Ken's work with Carmen on financial crisis that has been profoundly important. The book that they jointly put out on This Time is Different, 8 Centuries of Financial Folly, came out at an incredibly perfect time, 2009, just when the world had hit another major financial crisis. And what this book basically taught everybody, very helpfully, was that if you look at about 8 centuries, 800 years of data in terms of, and different episodes of financial crises, and look at these events across 70 countries, both emerging markets and developing economies and advanced economies, what is surprising is that you end up with a uniform set of facts, that there's actually a kind of common narrative that comes out of it. And the first big point is that it takes time to actually recover from a major financial crisis. And this was a very surprising fact, but something that I also remember several politicians holding on to when they were trying to explain why the recovery was taking time. The other big contribution of Ken is in the area of sovereign debt, something that we at the fund look at very closely. Ken, along with Jeremy Bulow, started off by raising an existential question about sovereign debt. The question was, how do you actually sustain debt in equilibrium in a world when there is very few enforcement mechanisms to have sovereigns repay the debt? And he argued for going beyond narrow reputation considerations and the importance of legal rights. And you can see that if you look at the same debt being issued under different kinds of law for a country, they command different prices consistent with this work. Ken did his own very important work on central bank credibility. He took an institutional approach and put a lot of emphasis on central bank independence, which is clearly very important for the conjuncture that we're in today. Ken's work on new open economy and macroeconomics that Kristalina alluded to, again, hugely impactful. In terms of exchange rates, the work with Macy on the lack of being able to predict at least short-term nominal exchange rates was extremely powerful and triggered another several decades of research and trying to figure out what is it that can help us in predicting exchange rates. The list keeps going, and I could be here for a very long time, but I don't have the time for that. So I am going to end quickly. I think the bottom line is that Ken's contributions have had exceptional policy relevance, bridging the gap between rigorous academic thinking and real-world policy making. I just want to end with a couple of ways I remember Ken, having known him as a student back in the day. And what I remember is that, one, Ken, when he thinks about ideas and when he's writing his papers, he relies a whole lot on intuition and much less on mathematical equations. So, for a lot of us, when we think of writing a paper, we start with a question, then we write out the equations and take us, and then we follow where the equations lead us. Ken, on the other hand, often knows where he's going to end up with the answers, and in a way that most of us couldn't do. He had the intuition about what the answer would be, and then the equations came afterwards. This other feature about Ken, which is very memorable to me, is that he cares a lot about his students, and he does the small things and the big things. I remember, he gave his students a lot of time in terms of listening to our ideas. But also I remember that when I was his colleague at Harvard, that he would go to undergraduate students for lunches. The fact that he wanted to stay close to his students was something that I remember very well. So Ken, I think in the economics profession, I would put you in the bucket of least likely to be replaced by artificial intelligence because of these two traits of yours. So with that, I'm going to stop, and we can jump into the first session, which is on exchange rate volatility and the macroeconomy. Thank you.